Content warning. This video is about a sensitive topic involving loss of life. We've removed any graphic content to comply with YouTube's guidelines. We aim to provide informative, factual journalism on a tragic event in the public interest that does not dismiss its seriousness. All clips are used under the doctrine of fair use for news reporting and analysis.
In an effort to shed a light on the horrors inflicted on our most vulnerable, it is hard to ignore one of the biggest injustices against our most vulnerable in our country's history that should have been stopped many years ago. Today, you could argue there has still not been any justice, that there are still so many people walking free who are responsible for something so heinous. And for all we know, something like this is still going on. What reason would we have to believe otherwise? It was allowed to go on for so long, and some would have defined it as an open secret. Today, we are diving deep into the twisted and unsettling story of Ghislaine Maxwell, a socialite turned accomplice and a woman who stood at the very center of Jeffrey Epstein's global web of human trafficking that catered to the world's elite. Some who were directly harmed by her claim she was far more evil than Epstein was. We have been wanting to talk about this case for years, and we've waited because we were hoping for the perfect opportunity to present it, especially once all the details were out. However, as has become so painfully clear to us in recent history, there may never be a perfect time, and there may never be justice, so we have to just talk about it. That is the very least we can do.
Ghislaine Noelle Marion Maxwell was born on Christmas Day of 1961 in a wealthy suburb of Paris, France. She was the youngest of 9 children born to Robert and Elizabeth Maxwell. Her family was prominent, wealthy, and internationally connected. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was a Czechoslovakian-born British media mogul, member of parliament, and war hero. Born Jan Hotch in 1923, he escaped the Holocaust, although most of his family perished in Auschwitz. He reinvented himself in the UK, eventually building a publishing empire that included the Daily Mirror and the US publisher Macmillan. Her mother, Elizabeth, was a French-born scholar of Holocaust studies. A woman of intelligence and poise, she earned a PhD later in life and often represented the family in charitable and intellectual circles.
Growing up, Ghislaine enjoyed a life of privilege and opportunity. She was raised in a household of wealth, influence, and high expectations. However, she was also affected by tragedy earlier in her life. One of her older brothers, Michael Maxwell, fell into a coma after a car accident in 1961, shortly before her birth. He remained in a coma until his death in 1967. However, the turmoil didn't end with the death of Michael. Robert's business dealings often resulted in public scandals, and his temperament at home was reportedly domineering and at times emotionally volatile. Ghislaine was said to be his favorite child. He even named his yacht Lady Ghislaine in her honor. However, the atmosphere within the Maxwell household was described by insiders as chaotic and pressurized. Robert Maxwell was not a normal father. He was tyrannical and paranoid, even installing secret recording devices on his children's phones. He surveilled his family like an intelligence operation. Loyalty to him was non-negotiable. He demanded it, even as he humiliated and verbally berated them. Ghislaine, in particular, seemed both dependent on and captivated by him. Some close to the family described her as brainwashed, or at least emotionally ensnared. She craved his approval and was devastated when she did not get it. After her mother said she suspected Robert was cheating, Ghislaine's response was chilling. She told her mother to never say that again. Her loyalty to him, even in the face of obvious wrongdoing, was absolute.
From a young age, Ghislaine was exposed to high society, frequently attending social events and meeting prominent figures. She also experienced the international nature of her family's business empire, often splitting time between the UK and France and traveling abroad. Ghislaine was privately educated at elite institutions. She attended Marlborough College, one of the UK's most prestigious boarding schools, known for its aristocratic clientele. Later, she went to study at Balliol, one of the University of Oxford's most distinguished colleges, where she earned a degree in modern history. During her time in Oxford, Ghislaine was well regarded for her social charisma and intellect. She moved in influential circles and was described by peers as confident, polished, and ambitious. Following her graduation in the early 1980s, Ghislaine took on various roles within her father's media empire, including The European, a newspaper Robert Maxwell launched in 1990 to create a pan-European English language publication. She served as director of the newspaper and was closely involved in its operations. In addition to her work in publishing, Ghislaine also launched her own ventures. She founded a women's social club in London called Maxwell's, which was short-lived but indicative of her social ambitions. She was a regular on the London social scene and developed a reputation as a glamorous, well-connected socialite. Fluent in both English and French, Ghislaine was known for her charm and networking abilities. She traveled frequently and began establishing connections in the U.S. as well, especially in New York high society.
In 1991, Robert Maxwell died under mysterious circumstances. His body was found floating near the Canary Islands after apparently falling from the Lady Ghislaine yacht. His death triggered a massive financial scandal. It was discovered that he had illegally siphoned hundreds of millions of pounds from employee pension funds to prop up his collapsing business empire. The Maxwell family was plunged into ruin. Ghislaine, devastated by her father's death and the ensuing scandal, left the UK shortly afterwards and moved to New York City, where she began to rebuild her life. This is where she met Jeffrey Epstein sometime in the early 1990s. At the time, Maxwell was trying to reestablish herself socially and financially in the US. Her once glamorous reputation in the UK had been tarnished by her father's financial scandal, and she was no longer backed by the immense fortune that she had once known. Epstein, on the other hand, was mysterious and wealthy. He moved in elite circles and had amassed a network of powerful connections, including politicians, celebrities, and royalty. Accounts vary as to how they met. What is clear is that they quickly became close. Some sources claim they were romantically involved early in their relationship, though this evolved into a more transactional, strategic partnership over time. Others like to paint Ghislaine as a victim of Epstein, but as you'll soon find out, she was anything but that.
Ghislaine became Epstein's closest confidant, fixer, and gatekeeper. Publicly, she was often described as his girlfriend or social liaison. Privately, however, she played a far more disturbing role. She helped Epstein expand and maintain his social and operational network, organizing social events, introducing him to influential figures, and reportedly recruiting young women and girls into his orbit. Her elite background, poise, and British charm made her a trusted presence in social circles that Epstein wished to infiltrate. Epstein's homes, particularly his Manhattan townhouse, Palm Beach estate, New Mexico ranch, and his private islands, Little St. James and the U.S. Virgin Islands, became the sites of systematic trafficking and SA in which Ghislaine participated and helped organize. Multiple survivors would later testify that Ghislaine groomed underage girls for Epstein by gaining their trust. Ghislaine would often play the role of a mentor or a mother figure, offering emotional support and guidance. She used this emotional manipulation to blur the lines between a healthy mentor-like relationship and something more sinister. Ghislaine would often engage with them in social settings, showing genuine interest in their lives and aspirations. She would listen to their stories and offer advice, making them feel valued and understood. Ghislaine would sometimes share her own experience or stories or to relate with the girls, making her seem more approachable and trustworthy. She promised opportunities, money, or mentorship to lure them in. Now, Ghislaine would offer the girls unique opportunities such as invitations to Epstein's lavish parties, trips, or even modeling gigs. These experiences were often exciting and flattering, making the girls feel special and privileged. She would sometimes provide financial support or gifts, which helped to create a sense of dependency. This could include paying for their education, providing them with clothing, or giving them cash. Ghislaine participated herself, including directing the girls to engage in inappropriate acts with Epstein. By exposing the girls to Epstein's vile and disgusting behavior in a gradual and even subtle way, and even participating in herself, Ghislaine helped normalize it. This made it easier for Epstein to eventually engage in more severe forms of SA. Ghislaine coordinated travel, accommodations, and scheduling of victims, ensuring a constant flow of new girls for Epstein, and finally, intimidated or manipulated victims into silence. Ghislaine would often isolate these girls from their families and friends, making them more reliant on her and Epstein. This isolation made it easier for them to be manipulated and controlled. These tactics were part of a larger pattern of grooming that allowed Epstein to exploit these young girls over an extended period of time, leading some to state they felt that Ghislaine was worse than Epstein himself.
One of the most high-profile survivors, Virginia Giuffre, accused Ghislaine of recruiting her at just 17 years old. She worked as a spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago and claimed that Ghislaine facilitated her essay by Epstein and others in his network, which included powerful men. For our international audience, Mar-a-Lago is a resort and National Historic Landmark on a barrier island in Palm Beach, Florida. It was built on 17 acres and contains 126 rooms. Since 1985, it has been owned by the current president of the United States, Donald Trump. In 2015, Virginia created a nonprofit called Victims Refuse Silence, now known as SOAR. Per their website, Speak Out, Act, Reclaim, or SOAR, is dedicated to providing a safe and empowering space for survivors of sex trafficking to reclaim their stories and stand up for themselves and each other.
Money should not be able to buy you the power to get away with hurting people, and it's not normal. I don't care how rich you are. You have the privilege of being wealthy. Great, fantastic. Do something great about it. Do something good with your money. Everything that happened on the Lolita Express and his other planes was the same thing that happened in his bedrooms and the massage rooms, on the beach, wherever we were. The abuse did not stop because we're in the air. 95% of the time, there was always sex involved. Jeffrey couldn't take a 2-hour flight without having to ejaculate. Like, that's how sick this man was. I was horrified, I was sad, I was angry, I was disgusted. I was a shell, and the only way that I could cope with what I was going through was, taking Xanax. It took a lot of people involved. It took doctors, psychiatrists, gynecologists, dentists. All these people knew what was going on, hairstylists. I mean, the list goes on. I could keep going on and on and on. Drivers, chauffeurs, butlers, housemaids. It took all of these people turning a blind eye, which they weren't blind to because we were right there blatantly in front of them. They knew exactly what was going on. I feel like it's my responsibility. I think it's everyone's responsibility in the world to not let our children grow up in an era where sex trafficking is the most profitable industry in the world. It's a $100 billion profit a year just on human trafficking, just on modern day slavery. How is that not being talked about? How is that even happening?
Virginia pursued criminal and civil actions against Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, of whom she claimed that she was trafficked to. Those lawsuits took place between 2015 and 2022, all of which ruled in Virginia's favor. She was awarded several settlements for undisclosed amounts, as well as financial contribution to her foundation. On July 2nd, 2019, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit ordered the unsealing of documents from the earlier civil suit by Virginia against Ghislaine Maxwell. The first batch of documents from the lawsuit were released to the public on August 9th, 2019, further implicating Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and a number of their associates. The following day, Epstein allegedly did that thing in his cell, the thing that he most certainly didn't do. YouTube treats adults as if they are children and has literally taken down some of our videos and hidden others from our subscribers for saying the S word that Epstein didn't do. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about here, go to your search engine of choice and type in Jeffrey Epstein, EDKH, and that should get you up to speed. Now, in an Instagram post dated March 31st, 2025, Virginia said that her car collided with a bus traveling at 70 miles per hour, resulting in her going into renal failure. Virginia said she had been given 4 days to live. Her family later said in a statement that police were called, but said that there was no one available to come to the scene. And Virginia, who was banged up and bruised, was subsequently taken to the hospital as her condition deteriorated. She was later discharged. Virginia Giuffre died at her home this year in near Gabby, Western Australia on April 25th, 2025 at the age of 41. According to her sister-in-law, Amanda Roberts, the world lost a fierce warrior. She wished for all survivors to get justice. That is who she was. It's been alleged that Virginia passed away by her own doing. Her father at first accepted the alleged cause of her death, but on May 1st, he said he thought that somebody got to her. However, many people are of the same mindset. This is largely in part to a tweet posted on December 10th, 2019, where Virginia shared the following. I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I S-word. I have made this known to my therapist and GP. If something happens to me in the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. Too many evil people want to see me quieted. She ended the tweet with a blue butterfly emoji, a symbol that had become synonymous with her organization and her own transformation from victim to survivor. It should be noted that prior to her untimely death, Virginia's life was not a happy one. She was in a marriage that was rife with DV and had lost custody of her children. For what it's worth, her attorney, Carrie Loudon, went on record to say that she did not believe her death to be suspicious in any way. However, it is hard not to wonder if we truly know all the facts here.
For years, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein appeared untouchable. They rubbed shoulders with billionaires, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Harvard professors, and Wall Street elites. Photographs from the time show them at high society galas and charity events. Ghislaine managed Epstein's properties, networked with influential friends, and maintained an image of sophistication and philanthropy. She also launched the Maxwell Foundation and later the Terra Mar Project, a short-lived environmental nonprofit focused on ocean conservation, which some viewed as a cover for her continued association with Epstein.
I'm the founder of an internet project called the Terra Mar Project. It's an ocean-based digital platform which I'm going to be talking to you about. I just want to go back briefly to talk to you about why I got involved in the ocean, and because I think it's important to have history. So I started diving when I was 9, having become passionate about the ocean, watching Jacques Cousteau on TV. And it led to a lifelong exploration around the ocean that ultimately ended with me becoming a deep worker submersible pilot. On one of my first submarine dives, I was absolutely so excited. I thought, my goodness, I'm going to see a new sea creature. I'm going to be this amazing explorer. And off I was. I went down into the deep. And I went down to over 1,500 feet. And at 1,500 feet, I switched on the lights, hoping to see a new mythical sea creature. But in fact, what I saw was a plastic hanger. I was so absolutely devastated, but it was at that moment that I realized that I was really going to dedicate the rest of my life to taking an involvement with and bringing an education around the ocean.
One of Epstein's most famous properties was Epstein Island, also known as Little St. James. The small private island is located in the U.S. Virgin Islands and measures about 70 acres. It was purchased by Epstein in 1998 and was a frequent destination for his high-profile guests. Epstein's island was often described as a luxurious retreat, featuring a main house, guest cottages, and various recreational facilities, including a spa and a gym. There was also this strange blue and white striped building that some described as a temple that's since been painted over. The island's seclusion and luxury made it a popular spot for Epstein to entertain his friends and associates, many of whom were influential figures in politics, business, and entertainment.
Jeffrey Epstein's legal troubles began surfacing in 2005. The Palm Beach Police Department initiated an investigation into reports that he was involved in the exploitation of minors. The investigation was sparked by a complaint from the stepmother of a 14-year-old girl who alleged that her stepdaughter had been essayed by Epstein at his Palm Beach mansion. In 2008, he reached a controversial plea deal in Florida that allowed him to serve just 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges, despite the serious nature of the charges. It should be noted that a grand jury ultimately indicted Epstein on a single count of solicitation rather than the multiple counts related to the essay of a minor that he was facing, and they further put the blame on the young victims rather than Epstein himself. Ghislaine remained largely in the background during this time, but in 2019, following renewed investigations and widespread public scrutiny, Epstein was arrested on federal trafficking charges in New York. As we mentioned earlier, he was found dead in his jail cell on August 10, 2019. Circumstances surrounding his death remained the subject of public controversy, conspiracy, and was widely memed online. After Epstein's death, attention quickly turned to Ghislaine Maxwell. She disappeared from public view and was rumored to be hiding in various locations from Europe to New England. Ghislaine was arrested at a secluded estate in Bradford, New Hampshire, which she had purchased in secret under a pseudonym. The charges against her included conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, perjury related to civil depositions, sex trafficking of a minor. Ghislaine's criminal trial began in November 2021 in the Southern District of New York. Several victims testified, recounting how she recruited them and facilitated their essay by Epstein, sometimes participating in these crimes herself. On December 29, 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on 5 federal charges, including sex trafficking of a minor. In June of 2022, she was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Her legal team filed an appeal in 2023, arguing that her trial was unfair due to issues with jury selection, media coverage, and the court's refusal to grant her bail. In 2025, the appeals process is still ongoing, and some of her attorneys continue to claim that she was scapegoated for Epstein's crimes. Part of her strategy has included challenging the credibility of the accusers and asserting that certain documents in the Epstein files are incomplete, exaggerated, or misrepresented. In public statements from prison, Ghislaine has maintained her innocence and has insisted she was unaware of the full extent of Epstein's crimes, claims that survivors and prosecutors alike utterly reject. After the conclusion of her trial, Ghislaine was incarcerated at Federal Correctional Institution, or FCI, Tallahassee, a low-security women's prison camp in Florida. However, all of that changed in the summer of 2025 when she was transferred to a minimum security prison camp in Texas. Federal Prison Camp Bryan, located in Central Texas, houses approximately 635 female inmates. Inmates at the camp generally have more freedoms and less strict security measures compared to higher security facilities.
We just have one question though, as I'm sure all of you do. Who else was involved? In recent years, U.S. courts have continued to unseal hundreds of pages of court documents tied to civil suits, depositions, and investigative files linked to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. These include flight logs from Epstein's private jets, names of alleged associates, co-conspirators, and clients, civil case filings and depositions from accusers, emails and correspondence involving Epstein and Maxwell. While many names have already come to light, redactions and earlier filings are slowly being lifted. Ghislaine Maxwell has already been named repeatedly in these documents, both as a central figure in the child trafficking and as a gatekeeper for Epstein's elite inner circle. Ghislaine was often the link between Epstein and his high-profile friends. She introduced Epstein to people like Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Les Wexner, and others. In some cases, survivors claim she facilitated meetings between these men and underage girls. Several victims have testified that Maxwell helped schedule their travel, instructed them on how to behave around powerful men, and in some cases, pressured them into silence. Her name appears frequently in relation to grooming protocols allegedly enforced in Epstein's homes. Ghislaine Maxwell's continued silence has led to speculation and conspiracy theories. Some observers argued that she may possess damning knowledge about individuals still shielded from prosecution. However, she has not cooperated with the authorities or named names in any official capacity. There have been rumors that she might attempt to leverage information in exchange for a reduced sentence, but to date, no such agreement has been reached. Despite being incarcerated, Ghislaine has managed to get limited media messages out to the public, often through her attorneys or intermediaries. In 2023, she gave a controversial jailhouse interview where she complained about having to make her bed properly and having to eat tofu. She also called Jeffrey Epstein's death a shock and again denied any role in trafficking.
They wake you up at 6 and you can go to breakfast, which consists of a cereal and a piece of fruit, generally. Lunch is around 10:30. The portion control is very odd. And then because I'm on a no meat diet, they're supposed to have either hummus or cottage cheese or tofu for you, but mostly I'd say about 95% of it's tofu if it's anything. And the tofu has there's no seasoning allowed, so there's no salt or pepper or anything. So it's beyond tasteless. I believe that he was murdered. Well, I was shocked. And I wondered how it had happened. Because as far as I was concerned, I was sure he was going to appeal. And I was sure that he was covered under the non-prosecution agreement. But I wasn't in the indictment. So I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even one of the co-conspirators. I obviously wish I'd never met him.
In 2025, Ghislaine Maxwell remains a symbol of elite impunity to many, though some fringe voices online continue to push alternate narratives portraying her as a victim of a political witch hunt. Her image is now forever associated with trafficking, CA, and corruption. The continued unsealing of the Epstein-related files in 2025 has rocked institutions and sparked investigations into how the pair were protected for so long. The revelations have had far-reaching implications. Elite networks are being scrutinized for complicity. Universities, banks, and charitable foundations connected to Epstein are reevaluating donations and ties. Politicians and media figures named in documents are facing renewed questions about their associations with Ghislaine Maxwell. And Ghislaine, at the center of it all, remains a figure of infamy, and her silence only deepens public fascination and frustration. Her conviction is not the end of the story. With new Epstein documents still being revealed, her role is continually being re-examined. Whether she will ever speak the full truth about Epstein, their clients, or her own motivations is probably unlikely. But one thing is clear. Maxwell's legacy is inseparable from a system that allowed the trafficking of children to flourish beneath a veneer of power, wealth, and privilege. If any change is to come from the crimes that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein committed, if we are to set a precedent that no matter who you are, whether you are one of America's elite, especially a politician, that you will be punished harshly for participating in trafficking of children, those who were involved all need to be held accountable for their actions, and we as Americans deserve to know the truth about what happened. So that way we can all do our part to make sure something like this never happens again.
I have physical and mental scars that will never heal. I have memories that will never go away. They say time can heal, but this won't. Not until the justice system makes an example out of these people with so-called privileges. I just call it money. The only time I can begin to heal is when their freedom is taken from them, just like they did to me and literally thousands of other victims.